Okay, Lydia. So in a similar vein to the animal rights and the welfare lobby, gambling has become a very dirty word in recent years in non-racing media and possibly in the public perception. In much the same way as people won't give up until racing's banned, there's obviously going to be a lot of people that are vehemently against gambling. I mean, once again, the same question: is there a point where we say, right, this is acceptable?
Well, yeah. I mean, I obviously think gambling is acceptable. I mean, look where I am, and I bet myself. But I mean, we should not be in any doubt that the reason that we're in this situation is because bookmakers have behaved reprehensibly towards people who have a gambling addiction, and that is proven to be. That's been evidenced by various press reports and various investigations, and that's why we're here. So that should be forgotten as the starting point, I think. So then we get to, okay, so we have people who could be addicted to gambling. And by the way, I really hate the phrase problem gambler, because that pushes the problem onto the individual, whereas we all know that in certain cases they have been actively targeted, and that is proved. And otherwise, there was also the form of gaming is quite often addictive. So, speed of replay, lack of time for reflection, all of those things, the kind of things that social media websites have keyed into to try and keep people on site. The same kind of technology is used to keep people gambling. So, it's not just the individual who has a problem. But many people gamble responsibly, happily, without it impacting in any way on their lives. Okay, maybe sometimes they might have a bad day and end up having a row with their husband or wife, but generally, it doesn't bother them. They're certainly not losing their house. Then it's not causing them any kind of hardship, and actually, it's something that they actively enjoy, and it's their money. Why shouldn't they play with it in any way that they wish to? Which is obviously a view that I would defend. The thing that worries me about the gambling review is that we're going to end up with the worst of all worlds, whereby people with a gambling compulsion are not protected adequately, whereby there isn't an overview of the whole industry. It's done individually via individual betting company and probably not consistently, and it might allow somebody to slip through the net here or there, not bet there but still be able to bet there in the way that it currently is. So that concerns me. But at the same time, then, for the more recreational gambler, the person who just doesn't have a problem, they've been given a series of hurdles that they're going to have to jump over in order to just spend their own money. And that, to me, seems wrong. I mean, that's it. I worry that is going to be wholly disproportionate, and people who want to be able to spend their money, people like me who want to have a bet, are going to find it just so difficult to get that bet on, that or just sort of think, well, why don't we go and do something else? And at the same time, I would like horse racing to take some responsibility, and this is particularly for horse racing, I think. Too often I've seen race courses and also participants link up with bookmakers without doing any kind of, as far as I can see, I would bet, any sort of due diligence in the way that I mean, in terms of how do you treat your customers? What happens if you do suspect that you have a compulsive gambler? But more particularly for horse racing customers, what's your record on restrictions? How easily can people get their fans of horse racing get their money on? And just do they get caught up in one of your algorithms, which means that somebody who I don't know, is retired, has decided to use their time to get really good at racing, have spent quite a lot of time at it and want to spend 50 quid on a Saturday, and are actually finding themselves, when they want 10 quid each way, they're restricted to 18 pence each way. Though I think horse racing has a responsibility to its fans who largely fund its sport. I mean, it's self-help in many ways, to make sure that those fans can actively engage with those bookmakers with whom they make commercial partnerships.
Okay, now it's interesting you say you like betting. You've admitted that, which is good. But I heard a wonderful interview where you talked about skiving off school to go to Cheltenham on the Wednesday, and betting from the age of 7. Those social services would be called in these days, wouldn't they?
They probably would. They probably would. Yeah. I mean, it was only 10 pences that I was having at the age of 7, and it was because I used to love watching horse racing with my granddad, and he would have a bet every Saturday. We used to go. I mean, we lived in Wolverhampton, so initially we used to go down the Stafford Road to F.A. Brooks. I'm told that famously he used to park my pram outside F.A. Brooks, and it would sit there all afternoon. But as I got a bit older, I would venture into F.A. Brooks, and then we moved. They moved to Wensfield, and so we went to Mick Durkin's shop in Wensfield as well. So. And my granddad would walk out there. He would be famous for going out saying, "Right, I'm going to back X." The famous one was Sharastani. He went out to back Sharastani, and Sharastani won. And he came back, and we were kind of, "Oh yeah, well done, Grandfather." He was kind of like, "I didn't back it." It's just sort of, why? And the story always was that the person in front of him had backed the same horse that he was going to back. So the person in front of him who backed Sharastani was the one that put my granddad off him. Anyway, so I used to spend a load of time with him, and fun at the weekends, fun on Saturday for him and his wife, my grandmother, would be to have 3 sort of cross doubles and a treble, 10 pences across the card. And then I'd go to Mama Green Dogs in the evening.
And it created a racing fan then, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
I mean, you anyone that's seen you prior to racing, you know, you always got your head down working hours before the first race. I mean, is that a labour of love, or do you need to cram all that information in?
Just how I am. I think I probably have that information, but it's a ritual. It was how I approached exams. You know, you go over things to make sure they're. It's kind of like a safety blanket as well. You've got them written down just in case you do have a blank, which very occasionally you do, as you do in real life. But yeah, I think everybody prepares in their own way, and over a while you fall into a routine of how you do it. That just happens to be how I do it.
Do you tend to bet more when you've done all that work?
No, I find the two things are totally different. I have notes on horses that take me to bet on them in a particular set of circumstances. Preparing for a day's horse racing is, you've got to prepare it from every horse's point of view, not just the horse that you fancy, because you're not broadcasting for you, you're broadcasting for everyone at home. And whilst you might fancy horse number 3, other people will fancy all the, one of the other horses in the field. So you've got to be able to see it from all perspectives, haven't you? So they are, I find, although there's obviously some overlap, they're entirely different.
Okay, and you've already ascertained that you were betting from a very early age. How serious do you take your betting these days?
I bet a lot in sort of small frittering amounts. I wasn't bad at it, but I certainly wasn't good at it. I was at, I suppose it would have been Racing. Would it have been Racing UK, or would it have been the original At the Races? One of the two. I think it was Racing UK, and I fancied this horse for the international handicap, and ended up just not winning enough on it. This was a conversation I had with Steve Mellish, actually. I know you're going to ask me about that. So, and he was kind of in despair at how little I'd managed to win on this sort of strong opinion, and it was his observation that that kind of thing happened quite a lot, and he was right. So he kind of offered a suggestion as to how to structure my betting. It was execution that was the problem, not the opinion. So I did that quite seriously for a while, which involved upping my stakes quite a large amount, which was quite scary, but it meant that every bet was a decision, rather than something that you could not really decide and allow to suddenly fritter away virtually the same amount without thinking. Each bet was a proper decision, and you had a certain framework within which to do it, so you removed unnecessary decision making. And I did that very seriously for about 12 or 14 years. I did it right up until my mother died in March 2020. Well, she got ill in January 2020. And then, obviously, immediately after, she didn't die of COVID, immediately after she died was the COVID and shutdown of horse racing from late March to June. And for some reason, I can't really explain why, I haven't really taken up betting seriously again since then. Now, that's not to say that I won't, but I just haven't. And, you know, it's a lot of work, as anyone who does it seriously knows. And so it's quite antisocial. And so, you know, I do a lot of work anyway for my actual work. To then sort of do betting work, I don't know, perhaps it's a bit selfish. Did I need a break from it? I'm probably doing a bit more written journalism than I was then. I never really have a plan about what I'm doing. Things just happen in the way that the betting just happened. So yeah, I mean, I could well go back to it, but at the moment I'm not betting in the same volume, anywhere near the same volume as I was for those sort of 12 to 14 years.
So were you doing it to seriously supplement your income, or was it all just like a climax of all the hard work?
Bit of both, really, bit of both, because work was, you know, I didn't, at one point, I'm freelance and have been since I was 22. And work looked a bit shaky to me, and so some elements of it, not the things that people see, but you know, the whole sort of portfolio of it, and it did cross my mind that would be useful, and it was useful. I mean, we got a new bathroom and a new kitchen out of it. We did the back flat roof. We painted the front of the house, so you know, it wasn't quite a useful supplement of income with the betting. But I also, I mean, mainly betting is, for me, is a sort of proof that you know what you're doing.
And would you be to the sort of, you know, I speak to quite a few professional punters, they price up a race and then they work on value. So would you have the ability to price
No, I mean,
a race?
I could price up a race. I wouldn't say I'd be able to, I could physically do it, but I wouldn't be much good at it. And I don't think I'd be nuanced in that kind of way. No, as I said, I do it a different way. I start with the opinion on the horse, what kind of race the horse should be running in, and this is partly the framework that I was talking about, and if I can back it, I mean, there'll be people, you know, you have many professional gamblers, you know, watching this, and they'll be screaming about how awful this method is, but you know, it works for me. And I one thing that I do know, having spoken to loads of professional gamblers over the years, is that there is no one way of doing it. Lots of people do it in different ways. It's whatever works for them. It's not always just pure maths. Sometimes it's to do with confidence as well, and how you go about things. Certainly for me at the start, it was to do with confidence, because I didn't think I could do it. So if I can back the horse each way and get my money back if it plays, I'll back it each way. If I can't back it each way and get my money back, then it's a win-only bet, and I won't back shorter than 2-1. And I know that's anathema to loads of people who'll be watching, but that's how I do it, and it works for me, and I'd be very respectful about what works for other people.
And you mentioned Steve sort of talked to you about betting and stuff. Was there anything specifically that he taught you that you didn't know that you then adopted?
No, as I say, it's only execution. It wasn't to do with finding the opinion.
Okay, so staking.
Yeah. And how, and the things what noise to ignore.
Okay, would you be a player, you know, when you were playing seriously on the exchanges, would you lay them? No,
not at all. Never laid a horse. Well, I once wrote an article about when exchanges first came out about laying, and that cured me of laying straight away, because you know, I just wasn't very good at it. It's not for me. That's I don't think like that, so therefore it would be a stretch for me to execute a bet like that. So I'm not, and whenever I'm asked to come up with a lay, as you often are, for, you know, X event, Y event, I'm terrible at that. Absolutely awful.
Is it adverse to negativity?
I don't think that way. So I'm forcing myself to do something that I don't naturally, in a way that I don't naturally think. So not surprisingly, the output is poor.
Are there any types of races you'd not even consider getting involved in?
I mean, by accident, I wouldn't normally get involved with sellers and claimers, which isn't to say I wouldn't particularly count it out. But again, I'm looking at a horse and deciding what I think a horse wants. I mean, necessarily they tend to be 3-year-old and up. I mean, I don't tend to have very many 2-year-old bets. This is when I used to do it. And I'd look at 3-year-old and upwards handicaps generally, and mostly I'd specialise at 10 furlongs upwards.